you can construct your business in a way that makes it almost impossible for somebody to compete with you and almost impossible for somebody to buy from somebody else. We know this in business and economics as a monopoly. And usually we think of monopolies as like, your Amazons or your Chat GPTs or those kind of companies. But what if your business, as a solopreneur or a small business, what if your business could become what's called a micro-monopoly, where you can make great money, own a competitive advantage that's hard for somebody else to overcome, and you find it easier to get customers because you have a dominant position. That is exactly what you can do with micro-monopolies. And it's exactly what we're going to look at in today's episode. So the word monopoly obviously conjures up people owning Park Lane on the Monopoly board. It conjures up Amazon and these kind of negative examples. But for a business, having a dominant market position is actually pretty powerful, as long as you don't get complacent and as long as you don't abuse that position. So a micro-monopoly is something that is very similar to a monopoly. Some might call it a category of one, but it's basically a concept of making it hard for anybody to compete with you. And I often think about competition. Increased competition is basically a tax a business pays because they are not unique enough. And it's very difficult in any industry or any market right now to say there is no competition. But with AI, it becomes more important to differentiate yourself in a way that gives you a strategic advantage. And we're going to look at how do you do that so that you end up making more money, your marketing becomes easier, sales become easier, and the long-term protection of your business becomes more clear and straightforward. So let's just look at what is a micro-monopoly. Well, micro-monopoly, point number one, is you own a market. You are the sole or the major dominant supplier of solutions into a market. Now, if you're a small business, you're doing $500,000, $1 million, 2 million even, or 200,000, you may think, there is no way I can dominate that a market. My market is too big. And you've just answered the question if you said that. Your market is too big. A lot of people think that actually to prosper, you need a huge total addressable market. They think you need tens of thousands of potential customers or hundreds of thousands of potential customers. Well, that's not true. And there's a great guy, I did a post about it on Instagram the other day, Kevin, I've forgotten his last name, but he coined the concept of 1,000 true fans. You can have a very valid, scalable and sustainable business with 1,000 true fans. And the same is true that if you operate in a small market, as long as there's enough market there to actually sustain your business, say over 10 years, that market will turn over and change and adapt. But ultimately, how many customers do you need to build a viable business? Well, I'll give you an example from my point of view. In my world, where target is 3 million for 2026, that is probably somewhere around, to actually hit that number, it's probably around 500 customers. And I've got, 30 people on my team. It's about 500 customers, right? How big does my market need to be to have 500 customers? Well, the reason often people go for very, very big markets is because they assume the bigger the market, the bigger the pond to fish in, and factoring in very low conversion rates. But the more narrow your market is, the more relevance your offer and your marketing becomes. And so say, for an example, I'm offering, LinkedIn training. The market for LinkedIn training is huge. The competition is huge. And therefore, the pricing is, tough to defend. So when you look at it like that and you go, well, hang on, the bigger the market, the more competition, the more marketing effort, the more noise I'm competing with, the weaker the conversion. But if I went, do you know what? I'm going to become the LinkedIn training company for marine industry, or the LinkedIn training company for luxury brands like Rolex and luxury brands and stuff like that, or the LinkedIn agency for that. Guess what? I would have more credibility in that space. My message would be more aligned. I could own that space. I would go to trade shows where they were. You see how suddenly, even though it's a small market in a big market, it's a corner, a niche in a market, I can actually improve my success, improve my relevance. And literally then, if you've got a luxury brand going, which LinkedIn company should we use? Their natural pivot will be to the LinkedIn company that has the most experience working with luxury and premium brands. And so this single seller advantage of how can I own a corner of the market that actually I can show that I have the most credibility with that corner of the market, so that when somebody who's a bit broader comes up against me, there's a natural bias towards me because my services are more relevant to their market. My case studies are more relevant to the market. And this is what leads to a massive shift in conversion rates. So if my total addressable market is, say, 100,000 companies or 1 million companies, and I'm marketing to them, guess what? My relevance goes down because I have a more generic, more catch-all message. And so my conversion rate trying to target all of those people goes down. But the moment I corner a market and carve off a subsection of that market that might be only 1,000 companies, I can then really improve my conversion rate. So instead of playing the classic 3% number that everybody quotes, I can play a 30, 40, 50% conversion rate because my message is far more defined, far more relevant. I can speak to the relevance of that. So by going, how can I create a market which would sustain me for 10 years, but is actually, my message can make me unique. That audience can make me unique, actually creates the first stage of a micro-monopoly. And many people don't like doing this because human beings are wired to fear, and to fear small. We are wired to fear that we would lose, loss aversion, and we are instinctively wired to believe more is better, which isn't true. It isn't true. And I've been talking about this for a little while because it is an instinctive belief that small is less and big is better. But if you look at industry, if you look at the economic reality, the companies that sell the most cars have the lowest margins. The companies that sell the smallest amount of cars have the highest margins. So there's this weird mental shift we have to make to see that actually selling to fewer people to a select market lifts revenue, lifts desirability, lifts all of those things, whereas appealing to a broader market lowers all those things. And if you're a small business where, actually a great year for you is, $700,000 or £1 million revenue, there is a market you could own that would give you all of that revenue, and you'd probably make better margins in it. We just fear doing it because of this fear of loss of opportunity. When in reality, you could be hitting some of those companies with your marketing right now, and they're ignoring you because they don't see you as relevant. So this single seller, how can I put myself into a space where I'm the only person in my market offering services specifically for that group? And I always say the sweet spot is look for, is there 10 years of life in this market? Because ultimately, most companies will turn and change it over a 10-year period. And so a 10-year lifespan, if you need 100 customers in a year, what you're looking for? You're looking for a market with 1,000 companies, 2,000 companies, not a huge amount. Look for how you can find and put yourself into, I am a big fish in a small pond, or I'm the biggest fish in a small pond. It's far more profitable, far more lucrative. So you're looking for those markets where I can be a big fish in a small pond compared to my competitors who do the same thing I do, but they may be appealing more broadly. Look for 10 years of life in the market. Make sure that market is actually, one you want to work in, that they have a problem you can solve, all those good things, but actually go, where's my 10-year market where I can be a big fish in a small pond? That narrowed relevance will actually improve preference towards you. So that creates the first stage of your micro-monopoly. Where's your small pond you can be a big fish in? The second is a unique product. Look, a lot of people, a lot of companies are offering solutions that are pretty much the same. They're offering, CRMs, they're offering social media courses, all these coaching. It's a lot of what we do is the same, right? But how you do it might be different. And you cannot create a micro-monopoly with a service, but you can create a micro-monopoly with a mechanism or a methodology, which is your IP. So let's say you sell marketing, for an example. If you sell marketing and your price is this, and somebody else sells marketing and their price is this, guess what? You are very comparable. What isn't comparable is your methodology or your mechanism, the way you do it. And so building your own signature system, your own signature methodology is something that actually nobody else can copy because it's yours. And what you can do then is, as part of what your marketing does, is actually to advocate, to champion a methodology. Think about Lean and Six Sigma. These are methodologies to improve productivity. But the very fact that they've been packaged into a methodology means people go, I want that methodology to solve the problem. And this is what's really important. When you decouple what you do from how you do it, you sell the how rather than what. And that seems a little counterintuitive to some other things I've said. This is why this methodology is so powerful. This is why companies should use this methodology to solve the problem. It becomes about advocating the method, not the process or the outcome is still leading, but you're advocating a model, a way of doing it so that people buy into that method. Interestingly, when cars were first coming around, the first cars were actually electric. Now, you wouldn't think that, but the first cars were electric, but a lot of people advocated for a combustion engine. Both people wanted cars, but actually the people that won out were the people who advocated for combustion engines, and the electric car died a death. Everybody wanted a combustion engine because people advocated for that way. In your small pond that you're now a big fish, you need to advocate for your way of solving problems, your way of achieving outcomes. Not necessarily saying I do copywriting. It's no, I have a methodology that helps people solve this problem. I have a methodology that helps people to get from A to B. The methodology becomes so unique, people want that. It's IP. You are making IP that people cannot copy without, infringing your copyright. So unique product or unique methodology is what people buy into. I'm buying your method to solve the problem. I'm buying your method. I'm choosing your method to solve the problem. So this is the second stage of creating that micro-monopoly. What is your method that you're going to advocate for in the market? And then that becomes something people go, yeah, I can see how that could work for us. I want that. And people will not be able to compare your methodology to somebody else's. It will be about they buy into your methodology, and your job is to advocate for that methodology. So it also separates you from the commodity of the inputs of what you do. If you sell coaching, for an example, you can sell sessions. No, sell the method. The method is more valuable. The method is more exciting. Yes, I want that method, rather than, I'm selling sessions, which, okay, who cares? So this unique methodology or process or system, you got Six Sigma, you got Lean, you got all of these different methods of how things are done. And your job is not to be the BBC and be impartial. Your job is to fight for yours and say why yours is better, why you believe it's better at solving the problems. So when you're putting out content and messaging, you should be putting everything through that lens of your methodology so people buy into it. And they can't really go to a competitor when they're advocating for your way. If they believe in your way, there's only you they can buy it from. So yes, somebody else might be able to do the same service, but they can't do it in your way in the same way. So you would choose to go to the people who do it best, and that's the authors of the methodology. And this is an economic principle that people buy into: a method to solve a problem, not just the solution to the problem. If you look at politics today, you have left-wing and you have right-wing politics. You have capitalists, you have socialists and socialism. And you look at it and go, how do we solve a problem like poverty? And you will have the more right-leaning people saying, well, the best way to solve poverty is to lower taxes, create more opportunity, and people will climb out of poverty. And then you have more left-leaning people who say, no, we have to take money from the more wealthy and give it to the people in poverty to help them rise out of poverty. Both people are trying to solve the same problem, but they have two different methods of solving it, and people will buy into a method. And people will disagree with a method. And that is fundamentally, it happens across all of society, that if you have a unique mechanism to solve a problem, people will either buy into it or they won't. And when they buy into it, they have to buy it from you. That's fundamentally about that uniqueness. You can't make a unique thing about we're a party unless you have a mechanism of how you're going to solve the problems, the way, your manifesto of how you solve the problems. And this applies in any business. You have a way of doing things that other people buy into. And if you don't have that, you are the same as everybody else. So that's number two, that uniqueness, that unique methodology or signature process, signature system to solve a problem and achieve a result. Then the third pillar of building this micro-monopoly in your business is that you're now thinking and focusing on what's the value of that transformation. So if you look at, for an example, where we talked a second ago about the signature system takes them from point A to point B, from problem to outcome, there is a gap of value. And this takes some work to really understand how valuable is that gap. How valuable is that change from point A to point B? And you price based on the value of that gap. And now this is very difficult for people in intangible services, where actually, and I had a whole debate with a coach on Reddit the other day about them saying coaching doesn't solve problems. Semantics, coaching does solve problems. The difference is the coach facilitates a person solving their own problems. But if you think about where somebody starts and where somebody finishes, you have to understand where you're taking them from and where they're going to end up. And what's the difference between those two positions? What's the before and after? And let's say, for an example, the difference is actually they're going from earning $50,000 a year to $75,000 a year. That's quite clear. Now, the bit that most people don't understand is whether you like it or not, people will attach a price tag, a value to your service. Even if your service doesn't have a financial gain, they will equate your service into some form of financial gain. In the end of the day, if you've got $5,000, if your service is $5,000, somebody has to believe that letting go of that $5,000 in their hand is worth more to them than keeping it. So even if you're selling something that doesn't have a financial gain, people have to go, okay, I'm giving you $5,000 mentally in whatever way I'm racking up in my head that $5,000 is going to be better off for me giving it to you. Now, there's a simple way to think about this is that if you're going to ask somebody for $5,000, they are going to be thinking about $50,000 worth of gain. Roughly speaking, that's mentally where people are. So if you're going to ask somebody for $5,000, the value of that transformation is going to be in their head to be a really sensible decision for them. It's going to stack up in their head to $50,000 worth of gain. So you have to really think about where's my starting point? Where are they coming to me at? And where are they going to end up? And if you don't know that, you will struggle to price on the value of the gain because you can't quantify for yourself the gain. So your pricing is just a stab in the dark. So if you want to price on value, you have to know the value of the transformation. And that's why that small pond, big fish at the beginning becomes so important, because you're now going, well, hang on a minute. If I'm going to pick you up here and you're a lawyer, and now when we're finished working together, you're going to be seen as the top lawyer in your field, in your city. You're going to be known more widely. You're going to get better quality clients, right? So currently you're getting a lot of referral work. Now you're going to be getting organic clients, and you can probably in the next 3 to 6 months fill your roster so you're full. People will add all that maths up and go, well, what does that mean for me? So I'm going to be about £100,000 better off. So it's worth £10,000. This is the value that you have to work out. Now, if there is an advantage to being in that small pond and being the big fish, because you're more relevant, people will be prepared to pay a little bit more for you than somebody who's not as relevant. So your relevance advantage, your resonance advantage now really kicks in, that you can be at the top of the market in terms of price because you're ultra specific. So you don't have to be middle of the road, but people will stack up that value. They will go, do you know what? Who do I have most confidence? Who do I have most certainty? Who do I think has the most expertise in my business, my area, that will get me the best result? And they will be prepared to pay marginally more, relatively speaking, to actually go with you over a competitor. But still, they will be looking at what is the gain. And if the gain is, actually, I'm getting $5,000 to pay you, but actually the value isn't very clear, and, I might get $5,000 gain, I'm not going to pay you. I'm not going to buy from you. So you've got to understand the value of the change that you're going to make happen. People pay for transformations to go from A to B. If you don't define that, if you don't know what that is, if you can't level it out, your price will never be value. Your price will be based on what the effort is worth. Yeah. How much they value your time, how much they value that service. And it will always be based on their mental calculation. So you've got to understand the value you're going to deliver and communicate that value so that the price is based on the value of the transformation, not the value of your time. If you want to make better margins, you've got to know that and own that. And the more relevant you are, the more that small pond is clearer defined, the more you can define what that value is. So that's where you can command the higher end of the pricing. That's where you'll get preference because your value is more clear, you're more relevant. That is just the number one thing. If you want to command the best prices, it's about relevance and the value exchange, understanding the difference you're going to make for them. And the more defined that pond is, guess what? The more you can define that value. So also think about it like this. Pricing is a filter. Yeah. And I use this example quite a lot. It's a bit of a silly example, but it is a good example. Yeah. If I sold bottled water for $100,000 a bottle, for a liter of bottled water, that's ridiculous. right? Some people will buy it because of status, because they've bought it. Maybe there's only 100 bottles in the world. How would it change my marketing? How would I do my marketing differently if I was selling bottled water for $100,000 a bottle? How would I do the marketing differently? Would I be doing TV ads? Would I be doing mass market advertising? How would I be selling that 100,000 bottled water? Where would I market it? Just think about that for a moment. Then, why would people buy it? What would be the motivation of them to buy this $100,000 bottle of water? Is it because it's really tasty water, really flavoursome water? Maybe. Is it a flex? 100%. Is it about status, saying you've got one of the only bottles of these $100,000 waters? Yes. Would everybody want to know, why is this $100,000 water so special? Yes. Pricing is a filter, and different levels of pricing will determine which buyers take you seriously. And at different pricing levels, you market differently. Ferrari does not market the same way as Ford. Lamborghini doesn't market the same way as Ferrari, right? And interestingly, it's quite annoying about Ferrari, but you can't buy the best Ferrari the first time. You can't buy them. You have to buy the cheapy Ferraris before they'll allow you to buy one of the best Ferraris. So let's say there's a $5 million Ferrari. You might have to buy a couple of $100,000 or $300,000 or $500,000 Ferraris before they will let you buy the top ones, right? So pricing and the way you sell your service is actually a filter of the buyers. So some people, to buy a $5 million Ferrari, will have bought 4 or 5 other cars to qualify. Pricing is a filter. Pricing is part of your marketing. And so building that micro-monopoly is also very important to think about. How am I pricing what I'm doing so that it filters out and shows a level of seriousness, a level of interest? How am I marketing in that pricing category? So pricing is not just the value, it also is a signal to the buyer. If you want to go into a standard jewelers and try and buy a watch, you can probably buy it and leave there today. If you go into a Rolex shop, it's highly unlikely you're going to be able to buy one and leave with it today. Yeah, there's probably a wait list. There's probably only limited things you could get. You see the difference. Yeah, and that creates a perception that people want to buy into, that if you're too accessible, the price is certain levels, it's probably not good. So when you're thinking about this whole micro-monopoly and how you're basically shrinking to make more money, think about Rolex. You have to think about, am I going to be the Casio or am I going to be the Rolex? Yeah, and micro-monopoly is very much that kind of, I'm operating in the premium space. Yeah, I'm operating in a very small market. Yeah. I'm operating in a way that's differentiated so nobody can replicate it in the same way. Yeah. These are all check marks to basically say it's uncopyable, which leaves me to the final of the 4 pillars of building a micro-monopoly is the barrier to entry, the moat. And I want to bring AI in here because AI is, to many people, still this nervousness in the background of an existential threat. And I like Daniel Priestley, and I saw him on a podcast with Stephen Bartlett recently where he said, it's hard in business to have a moat or a barrier to entry in 2025, 2026. And I disagree with him. I think it is. So if we think about what this moat or barrier to entry is, it is something that stops other people just going, oh, Dean's making a load of money. Let's do what Dean does. Yeah. It's also, AI is really cool. Why can't AI do what Dean does? So you have to think about, how am I structuring my business in a way that makes it hard for somebody else to come and eat my lunch? And in services, and especially in where you're delivering expertise as a service, this is quite hard to think about. So I want to talk about a couple of different moats you can build. So let's deal with the AI moat, right? AI is a very good generalist. it's a very good generalist. It has consumed so much information that it is a very good generalist. So the first way to build a moat is to make sure that you are not operating in a generalist space. If you want to outlast the AI revolution and still be around, you have to go, okay, how do I not be a generalist? So look for, in your market, in your ponds, the complexities of solving problems. Complexity increases value, but also makes it hard for other people to copy it. So look for AI works in patterns. It cannot understand messy context. It cannot understand hyper-specific situations. So your moat is your specialized judgment. Yeah, it's you having specialized knowledge in a very narrow area. So again, the little pond. So that's the big one that will help you be AI proof. I'll also add here, and I'm a big fan of the idea of thinking about the other way. If you think about where AI is, everybody's jumping on AI is going to do this, AI is going to do that, AI is going to do it other. Okay, think about, okay, if AI can do all of this stuff, what's the opposite of that? In other words, what's the ultimate human piece? Because people think like, we think very binary. We think that, okay, everything's going to go AI and everything human's going to be gone. That's not true, right? Actually, there will be a growth in some very specific human areas, and the value of specific ultra-human areas will go up. A bit like, for an example, direct mail. If you think about the beginning of the 2000s, direct mail was a big deal. And then, digital media, paid ads, that came along and became a booming industry. Did direct mail die? No, it didn't. Actually, specialized direct mail converts better now than it did back then because, one, there's less noise, and two, it's more high touch, more personalized, more intelligently done, whereas before it was very mass market. So as AI goes this way, zig, where's the zag? Where's the ultra-human bit that allows you to have an AI moat? So you've got your specialized knowledge, which protects you from an AI, deep, specialized, complex areas, specialized. So that protects you. And then you've got the ultra-human part. What are the ultra-human parts that I can own that AI can't touch? So that's the AI moat. Then you've got the resonance moat. If you understand your target audience very, very deeply, right? You understand their language, you understand and have the case studies, the emotional trust, the visibility in that market, the resonance moat. It's very hard for somebody to overcome that. If you deeply understand that market, people will find it hard to catch up with you. Yeah, because your body of work, your history, your depth of market penetration, it will be very difficult for somebody to come and take that on. And it will take them years to try and take you on. Big companies coming in can't afford to do all of that stuff for the return. So a big company trying to hedge into your market won't be able to invest to build that. It sounds crazy, but they're thinking about ROI, and the ROI of trying to take you on doesn't make sense. So they will, for commercial reasons, give up quite quickly because it just doesn't make sense to try and take on that place. So there's that resonance moat. Do you understand the language? Do you understand the situation so deeply that somebody would find it hard to get that level of knowledge and expertise and catch you up? Then you've also got the institutional moat. In other words, the fact that you've been around long enough, you've got the depth of work, the experience, the history that outsiders trying to come in just won't have. And because they're not in the trenches enough, they won't really get it. So this is kind of related to the resonance note, but it's actually a bit deeper. The more ingrained you are in the market, the more you're in there, the more experience you've got that somebody behind you just doesn't have. And that leads us to the final one, which is the barrier to entry, or the moats. And there's a few different moats here that we can look at. One of the big ones is obviously the defense against AI. If you look at where AI is going at the moment, AI is a brilliant generalist. base level knowledge. It can consume the internet and churn out stuff. And so apps will come out for kind of common problems. But where you've got a real ultra defense against AI is the complexity, the messiness, the specificity, the pattern recognition that AI won't be able to have, because the market is small in the sense there's not a lot of data that AI can leverage. The specificity, the nuances, the messiness of those situations, the complexity of those situations, it won't be able to do. And it won't be able to figure out the second layer of problems, the knock-on effects and all of that stuff that a human could do. So the specificity moat or the complexity moat will really help you in terms of defending yourself against AI. There's also another thing to think about on this specificity moat. If the world is going one way, zigging, where's the zag? And by this, I mean, we're living in an uncertain time where it's hard to know where AI is going to end up. It's hard to know how much of it is hype. And so thinking 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line gets really, hard to do. So there is a pattern. Every time you have innovation, there is also the old way becomes a premium. What do I mean by that? If you look at the early 2000s with direct mail, the marketing through the post, everybody was doing it. Everybody was firing it out. And the costs of doing it came down. The ROI of it fell, and it became a commodity way of doing things. And then the internet came along with paid ads and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of the money that was in direct mail, because it was expensive to do and not as efficient, went into paid online ads. But if you look at direct mail today, people will do direct mail in a more tailored, they'll spend a bit more on it. It's more high touch, it gets higher returns, but they do less of it. So they spend a bit more per item, and it's a kind of very high touch marketing effort, whereas it used to be mass market. So when the world zigs, there is also a zag. There is an other way. So as AI is going, everything will be simplified and AI can do everything. Look for where the premium will be and build your moat in the premium human. Premium human. This is going to become a thing. Everybody's obsessed with where AI is going to make everything democratized and cheaper and replace humans. Look for where the premium human bits will be in your business. Look for where the ultra human will be that people will pay more for. And that's your defense against AI coming and carving off part of your business. So that's a really powerful moat, the ultra-human premium, and also the nuance and complexity and specificity that AI won't be able to come for. Then you've got the authority moat. In a small micro niche, word of mouth is massive. Yeah, so word of mouth and building that word of mouth becomes good. And so you owning that micro niche, you become the standard, you become the IBM. Nobody gets fired for using IBM. So you own the IBM in your tiny pond. You are the IBM. So you are less risky than everybody else because you've been there the longest, you've owned it, you've networked in it, you know that. So the bubble, your micro niche, actually protects you from new entrants because they don't have the experience, the track record, the history, all of that stuff. So that authority moat really does defend you and protect you. The other thing to think about is with the moat is the switching cost. If people start to buy into your methodology and they start to think about your way, somebody has to counter that and spend effort and time advocating for their way. And so the cost of change, the mental cost of change, the cost to market a different way is quite expensive. So if you can start to advocate for your methodology, people start to buy into it, then somebody has to come and market their alternative, which is expensive. And so when you think about that, you go, well, hang on a minute, that cost of changing, that cost of overturning becomes expensive. And you can't do this in a big, wide, huge market because it's very difficult to do. But you can in an ultra niche or a micro niche. As long as that niche is big enough to supply you with revenue for 10 years, that's good. But if you think about that, it could be 10,000 people. 10,000 people knowing what you do could be you dominating a market and really owning it. And this is where that cost of switching, that mental cost for somebody else becomes very difficult, because it's very easy for any small business to own a market that's 10,000 people or 10,000 businesses. Might take time, it might take a plan, but it does not need mass marketing. It needs consistent, repeated messaging, the same message, the campaign to get people to buy into it. And that cost of switching, that overcoming your institutionalization becomes very expensive. And then the other thing is your complexity moat, right? If you really deeply understand their market, if you really deeply understand their language, their shared struggles, if you deeply understand that, it will take somebody time to understand that if they're coming in as a new entrant. And if you've built a system, it will be hard to be replicated. So think about, could somebody replicate what I'm doing in a weekend? If they can, you haven't built a micro-monopoly. If they think about, could somebody start up and start eating my lunch in a week? You don't have it. So there's a level of complexity that you have to build into what you're doing that makes it very difficult for somebody to copy. So it's simple to use, maybe, but it's hard to build. And the felt experience, the depth of knowledge, the understanding of the shared language in that industry, all of that stuff, it can't easily be copied in a weekend. So think about, like, what are those things in this business model, in my process, that are hard for somebody to go, oh, well, yours is the ABC method, ours is the XYZ method, and it's pretty much the same. And think about it. Even if somebody comes in and says the same things you do, they have to be able to demonstrate they can do it. The doing it, delivering it, is the complexity moat. So if you pick a problem that's easy to solve, guess what? Somebody else will go, there's an opportunity, I can solve it too. Look for the complicated, because that's where the value is. Look for the nuances, because that's where the value is. Look for the things that are not easy answers, because that's where the value is. This is how you build that micro-monopoly. And what do you need? You need a problem. You need an audience that's not too big. You need a resonant message, and you need a system. Yeah, a system that makes you different. Those are the key things. And the micro-monopoly is not about shafting people like some of these big companies doing. It's about creating a defensible position that makes it easier for you to make sales, makes it easier for you to sustain your business and sustain pricing. It stops this it stops you being easy to compete with. And remember how I said earlier, there is a tax you pay for being the same as somebody else. Building your own micro-monopoly is basically tax relief. It makes it easier for you to market. It makes it easier for you to get clients. It makes it easier for you to get repeat business. Makes it easier for you to generate a reputation that is widely known. All of that stuff kicks in because you have decided to be a micro-monopoly. And the world is telling you, social media is telling you, no, go mass, go big, more. And there's that guy, can never remember his surname, started in Wired, started his own business, and he advocates for this, and I firmly believe it. 1,000 true fans will be a totally sustainable business. But the issue is, you need the fans who've bought into you, bought into the way you do things, and all are coming from the same background so that you can actually make money. So I'm a firm believer in this small audience, big results, rather than big audience equals big results, because it just does not play out in the data. For most businesses, and 90% of businesses are small and micro businesses, they don't need to compete with big brands. They don't need to compete and should not compete with other people doing exactly the same. They should be embracing their uniqueness, embracing a small audience so they can make more money and more profit And that is a micro-monopoly.